You are listening to the F11 Photography Podcast.
To the chasers of light, to the purveyors of pictures, to all of you listening from around the world, this is the F11 Photography Podcast. I am your host, Kevin Deal, along with your other host, who has a little bit of a cold, Mr. Brandon Gorrie.
How we doing, guys? It's good to be here at the wee hours of the morning. It's nice to record in the studio. I tell you what, we're drinking some coffee. We've got Kevin over here with his iced Americano. I myself have a drip with oat milk, and we're really excited to get this thing on the hump. Yes,
apologies up front if Brandon starts going.
It's on the way. Here, I'm going to mute my mic.
And he's muting his mic, and there comes the cough. All right, this is episode number 46, or 46 if you're from Mexico.
That's really good, yeah.
Yes. Always pronounce the vowels. That's the key. So, yes, this is episode 46, and I am excited because if you listen to this pod, I put a lot of work in on the back end editing these podcasts. I got to go find the breaks and insert commercials and insert drops from previous guests we had that said, hey, this is so-and-so, and you're listening to the F11 Photography Podcast and all that. It takes me a lot of time each week, and sometimes it's why I delay releasing an episode for a couple days because I'm fucking lazy. And I'm just like, I don't really want to do editing. So I decided to reapproach the way I do things. And I have this Rode podcast console thingy, which has a bunch of buttons and pads and all that on it. And I've decided to be smarter, work smarter, not harder, and run it more like live radio. And that we have all of our commercials and everything now programmed to pads. And I may have to do a lot less editing on the back end now because I don't have to insert anything. It's already recorded and baked into the pod. So I can sit here and just hit things like that and that and that and all sorts of cool things, you know. I have all the pads in front of me now, and I'm rocking this thing like a motherfucking video game, which is great. So, how you been, dude?
Well, I'll tell you one thing, Kevin. I haven't really been dominating the back end like you have. I wish I was, but
that's what she said?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm still looking for back end to dominate, but other than that, no, it's been...
Brandon's mom is listening to this pod like, oh, fuck.
It's been really busy. It's been very, very video heavy recently, of course. For those of you who don't know, that is my 9 to 5. That is what keeps the electricity on. And so we've had a lot of upcoming projects releasing for the holidays, which means it's been a very, very busy week this week.
Well, between the two of us, Brandon is definitely the connoisseur of video, and we're going to do a video episode. Our next episode is actually going to be focused on video. But speaking of video, it's the end of the year. I've been super busy releasing YouTube episodes. I've actually I have 5 YouTube episodes coming out in November. I'm sorry. Yeah, November. It's November. I forgot what month it is. I've already had 4 YouTube episodes come out this month, and I have a 5th one coming out tonight at 10 p.m. our time because TT Artisan, are you familiar with TT Artisan?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so TT Artisan reached out to me, and they're like, hey, we're releasing a 35 1.2 for Fuji. It's coming out on November 20th. We want to give you an advance copy so you can put it through its paces and put a review together, but the only stipulation is that you don't put the review out before the release date, which is November 20th at noon Beijing time, which is 10 p.m. our time on Sunday. So it's coming out Monday morning, right at noon. So I guess technically that's afternoon, Beijing time.
Does that lens have autofocus?
Yes, that's the key. And so The reason why this launch is so big is because It's a 35 1.4 autofocus lens for $150. And you can't buy a Fuji autofocus lens. Like they make an XC, which is $200. And so that's within $50 of it. But then after that, it's like, even Viltrox is $279. And then you get up into like that $399. And even if you get, I'm talking about anything between $30 and $35. So Sigma makes a 30 1.4 that's about $300. I have that lens. I love that lens. It's amazing. And then, you go all the way up to like the Fuji 33 1.4, which is like $700. And now this one, I'm sorry, I may have said 1.4. I did say 1.4. It's actually a 1.8. I'm sorry. I should definitely clarify that because it's like a third of a stop or something.
You started with 1.2, and I was just like, wow, Artisans is stepping up.
Yeah, I meant to say 1.8. Sorry. It's a 35 1.8. But even that being said, I mean, 1.8, that's still lets in quite a bit of light. $150 for autofocus. And I tested it out, and it's a really, for the money, it's a good lens. There's a couple weird, quirky things about it, like the minimum focusing distance on it is like twice that of everything else. So like all the other lenses out there, you can get like a foot away. This one, you get 2 feet away. And the difference in bokeh between 1 feet and 2 feet, if you're somebody who's like a street photographer and you want to get right up to something, it's pretty huge. So that's about the one negative thing I can give that lens is that the bokeh on it is just like meh, because of the minimum focusing distance. But then again, if you're buying a lens for street photography, you tend to shoot scenes that are somewhat far away anyway, so does bokeh really matter? Low light is probably the reason why you're going after this lens. So, but I'm excited because I am, my YouTube channel is starting to get to the point, not only am I getting offered lenses, because I did a Viltrox 75 1.2 review, and I did get that lens for free, but I got it after it came out. This is the first time I've gotten a lens pre-release. And so I've climbed a tier. I'm excited. But the other thing about the reason why I'm releasing a ton of YouTube videos right now is because at the end of the year there's a dip. They call it the December YouTube dip. All the advertisers they've essentially blown their wad for the year, and they've spent all of their money. And there's this gigantic dip in advertising revenues that carries on over into January. So my thought process was, let's just release as many videos as I can in November to try to get as much revenue as I can. And frankly, I am going to be rather busy in December anyway. So I'm not going to have a lot of time to put together videos. So I've released an anticipation video about the new 24 to 105 2.8 from Canon. I just released the Photo Deox Warrior review yesterday, and then I'm doing the TT Artisan here tonight at 10 p.m. So I'm very busy on YouTube. I'm excited about that. I'm also excited that I talked about how I stopped watching the Texas Rangers for a year. I took a year off and then only started watching them in the playoffs. And sure enough, they went on a run and won the whole fucking thing. They won the World Series. Fuck Houston. Bunch of cheating ass motherfuckers. I avoided 3 decades, and the Rangers finally won the World Series. So I'm super happy about that.
Yep, I'll let you know when I start watching baseball, but I'm really happy that your team was the better team than the other teams, and finally got recognition for that fact.
Yay. The little Rangers finally did it. So all right, let's go to today's sponsor.
You are listening to the F11 Photography Podcast.
Harness the power of artificial intelligence with Luminar Neo. Artificial intelligence is the buzzword in the photography industry right now. It's becoming so widely used in our industry, it's hard to tell when it's hype and when it's actually an effective tool. Luminar Neo actually uses AI for good by giving you easy-to-use modules that are powerful and improve your photography. And now they're happy to announce the introduction of Generace, which is their generative AI fill. What is Generace? It's a smart personal assistant that will help you remove unwanted distractions from your image. Unlike a standard erase tool, it leverages the power of AI to fill the gaps with textures and other elements to match the surrounding area. You'll easily get realistic results because Generace is analyzing your photographs to make sure that the results look realistic, mimicking patterns and objects that it sees. In addition to other powerful modules like relight, power line removal, and AI masking, Luminar Neo is on the cutting edge of artificial intelligence, but it's not just a plugin for Photoshop. You can actually use it as a standalone program with a catalog organizer and all that. It also has presets. Use the code Kevin10 at checkout or check out the link in this podcast to get 10% off your copy of Luminar Neo today. All right, so we're trying out the commercials pre-recorded now. What do you think?
That was pretty silky. Not gonna lie, that was pretty good.
Got some lo-fi going. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna keep doing the lo-fi. It's just easier to do that than trying to do the live spots. I stumble over myself. I say the word fuck. It's pretty unprofessional. And so I would imagine that the manufacturers of these products would appreciate it if I just had something a little more slick ahead of time.
Yeah, the fun thing about lo-fi is it's one of those music genres that it can be overrated and underrated at the same time. Like, we've all heard lo-fi, we all like lo-fi, and it's kind of like past its time, but at the same time, you're not going to complain if there's lo-fi playing in the morning at any time.
Yeah, I think that lo-fi is a very unintimidating, unoffensive genre of music in the sense that, like, I could take somebody who, like, listens to bro country or something, and if they're like watching one of my YouTube videos and I have lo-fi in the background, they're not gonna go, oh, this is distracting. They're just gonna go, okay, cool, there's music in the background and it's not distracting me or pissing me off, and I'm paying attention to the video. It helps. I guess it's a genre of music that keeps you focused.
I think it carries. It's a good vessel. It's like cauliflower. It just carries the message across. Doesn't do anything else.
Exactly. So we are talking today. The topic that we settled on is buying gear responsibly. And there's a lot to unpack there. So I want to start with overcoming the temptation to get the latest and greatest. Don't be that fickle idiot. And I want to point to an example that is relevant right now. Sony just announced the A9 III, which has a global shutter. And a global shutter is something that the photography industry and videography industry has been wanting for years, and Sony finally did it. And, you go to the comments section, everyone's all like, oh my God, I need a global shutter. I'm going to leave my Nikon and I'm going to leave my Canon system and go over to Sony. Like, don't be a fucking idiot. Like, first of all, are you shooting sports for the Olympics? No. Are you shooting video that requires, fast, jerky motion left to right, like lateral motion? No. Okay. Are you trying to capture a speeding bullet? No. Like, what the fuck do you need a global shutter for? Like, you just want to spend $6,000 so you can brag that you have the latest and greatest. And that, to me, is fucking stupid. Don't do that. Plus, like, just think about the loss you're going to take. So, like, if you go out and you buy a $4,000 to $6,000 camera, and then you invest, when you buy a camera, you have to invest in the system. And so, at the very least, you're spending a couple $1,000s more on lenses, all the way up to $20,000 to $30,000 if you have a full setup of lenses, a full lineup of lenses. And then just because Sony comes out with something, which, by the way, whether you're on Nikon or Panasonic or Canon, within the next 2 to 3 years, they're all going to have global shutters too. So why in the fuck would you sell that off and take a huge loss? Because let's just say you drop 30 grand on a system with all the lenses and everything like that. When you go to a camera store and trade it in, you might get 15. You just took a 50% loss on your setup. Oh, and by the way, you need to go out and buy the Sony version of it now. Now, you have $15,000 in hand, but if you're going to make the investment in the same glass, because the glass is all about the same price, you have to go another $15,000 out of pocket to equal that $30,000. So now you're sitting here. just pissing away 15 G's every time you want to switch camera systems because they gave you one fucking feature. That is so stupid. Just wait. In a couple years, your Canon, your Nikon, or whatever will have a global shutter, and then the only thing you have to swap out is the camera body. You can keep all the glass, and you can do all that. And so I think people who are that way are fucking stupid. There are some really cool things about the global shutter. I think we'll talk about it in the next episode in relation to video. But there are also drawbacks to it because, Sony loves to be the first person out there to go, oh, look, we got this brand new feature. Well, they're also kind of the guinea pig because do you know what the base ISO of the A9 Mark III is?
Ooh, can I guess?
Yes.
1600.
Oh, you're thinking video. I'm talking about stills.
Oh, sorry. 64.
250.
Wow.
It's the consequence of having a global shutter. Now, if you're listening and you don't know what a global shutter is, when you take a picture, it kind of moves like a push broom. So it reads from top to bottom. It's not just taking a flash like a film emulsion does. Like, when you shoot film, it bakes the light that hits it simultaneously. It hits it at the speed of light. It bakes in for the amount of time that you have your shutter open, and then the shutter closes, and that's your exposure. With digital, it reads top to bottom. And that's why you have this phenomenon in mirrorless cameras, especially when you use electronic shutter called rolling shutter. And the A9 III overcomes that because it doesn't have that, because it's a global shutter. It works just like a film emulsion would work. It takes a flash of everything all at once and closes. And so that's why everybody's getting excited about it. But to the subject at hand, do you need that? Because, like, for instance, that base ISO of 250, man, that, to me, I shoot like fine art, fashion editorial type stuff. I want as little noise as possible. I mean, not that noise bothers me, but I tend to want to shoot at the smallest ISO possible. And starting at 250, I mean, think about it. If you have a base ISO of 250 and you're shooting with like an 85 1.2 lens, and you want to go out and take pictures in broad daylight, you're going to have to use an ND filter. Like, you have to slow down the light, and so there's consequences to that. Just to brag that you have a global shutter, now you're putting a filter in front of your lens, and like, it'd be one thing if you had a 200 base ISO, but 250. I mean, that's getting up there for stills. For video, I actually don't know what the base ISO on the Sony A9 is. I'm going to let you talk for a second while I look it up.
Well, yeah. So I was going to respond to something you were going to say, but
go ahead.
I guess. Well, yeah, the thing that like came across my mind for having a base ISO of 250 is like I shoot a lot of dark stuff. So if I'm bringing a file, no matter how big it is, no matter how much dynamic range is in that file into Capture One, if I'm trying to bump up the shadows and make like an even tone thing, and even middle ground histogram, that's going to be problematic. That's a risky print. You know what I mean? That's a risky editorial to size.
Yeah. You guessed 1600 base ISO for video.
For video,
it's 2000.
Wow, I was close. Is that in S-Log or is that just
S-Log 3? Yeah.
Wow.
But anyway, point being,
I think they can handle it though.
Yeah, I was probably. I mean, I shoot C-Log 3 a lot. I'll shoot 16 and 3200 ISO and C-Log 3, depending on the situation. It's not too noisy, but yes, overcome the temptation to buy the latest and the greatest. Don't be fickle. I've met a lot of very professional photographers in my day. I actually know professional photographers who still shoot on 5D Mark IIIs, which is 2011, 2012 technology, and they are celebrity photographers. They are making bank, and they don't need the latest and the greatest. My friend Valerie shoots on a 5D Mark IV, and she is a high-end. She does a lot of high-end beauty stuff up in Toronto. And she hasn't even made the switch to mirrorless yet, because at the end of the day, probably 99% of photographers out there don't need stuff like a global shutter. So that is definitely one way to be responsible, which is, I always say camera manufacturers love the fickle photographer, because they're the ones, like, professionals don't go out and usually buy the latest and the greatest. Professionals are so busy being professional that they're taking advantage of the previous generation of technology. They're still figuring out all the things they can achieve with that. And they're so distracted by that and making art because they're right-brain creatives that they're not out there in Facebook groups bragging about, look what I have. I have the latest. And they're like, look what I made, not look what I have. And if you have that mentality of look what I made, not look what I have. Now, I'm a gear person. I love gear. But I've started to slow down in my gear buying. I've said no to things that have recently come out because I can't justify them. Like, would I love to have the new Fuji GFX 102? Yeah, the improved autofocus, like that alone is so appealing to me. But for $7,500, when I just about a year and a half ago paid $6,000 for the predecessor, which, by the way, they've actually proven it's the exact same sensor. They moved the base ISO down, but when they did like dynamic range tests, it's the same sensor. So I'm only paying for the autofocus. And then there's all this other tech inside the 102, which I did a whole episode on, but like it's very video centric now. They're trying to move everybody into this beautiful medium format sensor for video, which is kind of weird because when you shoot on video, it only uses a small part of the sensor because 4K video doesn't need that much space. But anyway, there's a bunch of stuff I'd be paying for that I'd never use. And so that's really the real reason why I'm just kind of like, yeah, I don't know, man. And there's nothing wrong with the camera that I have. I don't feel like I've accomplished everything I want to accomplish with my 100 S. And so I don't think it's time. And we'll talk about like when it's time to upgrade and all that. That's coming up. But you know, what are your thoughts on having the latest and the greatest? I already think I know the answer, but I'm going to let you speak on it because I talk too much on this pod.
I think having the latest and the greatest is an absolute luxury. Do I think you need it? Absolutely not. In fact, one thing I've been moving closer towards that I think you do a great job of is making the picture you want to see in your head in front of you with light. Taking tons of time to move your light around, like taking enough time to actually bother your models to have them bored on set because you're just adjusting light, and so I think really light is your biggest asset in the studio and outside, and when you have plenty of it at your disposal, it doesn't matter like your system, like your body almost goes out the window. Bar autofocus, your body pretty much goes out the window. Same with your lenses, because you can shoot at a much sharper area. Like you could get a $250 Yongnuo 50mm 1.8, which is practically plastic, and move it to f5.6 outside and shoot at like 1/100th of a second and have the model just be more still and be more careful. And you can still take like fantastic photos at around 400 ISO. Like the gear is not the issue. It's learning photography. The gear will never solve your creative block, which I've been through that before, where you think like you've got creative block. You're like, oh, if I just buy this new lens, it'll give me new opportunities to see the world and that sort of stuff. But I just think that anytime that you think you can justify buying new gear, it's either because you're either limited by what you currently have, or you can justify it by simply earning that money through photography and it's supplemental.
Well, I own several cameras. We joke about my, the fact that I love gear and so on and so forth, but I own medium format, full frame, and APS-C. Not only do I own APS-C, but I own old APS-C technology. So I have a Fuji X-T20 that is from 2017. And to your point about getting everything right at the front end, I want to make a very experience-based observation that I have taken in over the years, which is that the difference between a medium format camera, a full frame camera, an APS-C camera, and your iPhone are very little if a situation is lit up correctly. You can take professional photos with an iPhone that has a tiny ass sensor and they will look amazing if it is well lit, if you lit everything up well to begin with. I mean, I'm sure you've seen some pictures on your Instagram feed. You're like, wow, that's beautiful. And then you realize, oh shit, that was taken with an iPhone. And it's because they're well lit situations. That is the key, photograph, capture light. That's what that means. And where smaller sensors fall apart is in poorly lit situations. But the key word there is poorly. Why is the situation poorly lit? Is it poorly lit because you chose the wrong place to shoot? Is it poorly lit because you don't understand lighting and you didn't know how to set up the light correctly in your studio? If that's the case, it has nothing to do with your equipment and everything to do with you, because if that situation were properly lit and you took that shot with an APS-C versus a medium format, especially in a controlled environment like a studio where depth of field matters less, it's going to be really hard to tell the difference between them when you're looking at on something like Instagram or something like that. Now, if you blow it up to a 30 by 40 print, that might be a little different. But I'll just use an example to show Brandon. You guys can't see it, but when we finally move on to doing video stuff on this pod, which I think we're going to do in the new year, it'll make more sense. But there's a picture on the wall of a bridge that I have blown up in our studio. It's one of my favorite pictures I've ever taken. I shot it. I bought a Mamiya RB67, and to test with the RB67, when I was learning the camera's habits, I would take a small digital camera with me, and I would take test shots to kind of get my exposure right. Yes, I could use the f/16 rule and all that, but I just wanted to test that out and see how accurate it was next to my camera. Anyway, I was just taking a test shot, getting my light right, and I got this perfect synchronization of these kayakers and a jogger, and perfect synchronization, perfect symmetry. And I made a print out of it with a 20 megapixel, 24 megapixel, 2017 little handheld camera. And with the kit lens, they're 18 to 55, so it's a zoom lens, so it's not as sharp as everything else. And it's one of my best shots I've ever taken. It was one of my favorite shots I've ever taken. Point being is that if I had taken that shot with the latest and greatest camera, or I took it with my tiny little 2017 pocket Fuji camera, most people wouldn't be able to tell the difference what kind of gear I used. So, what, do you want to say something?
Oh, I'm just leaning forward in agreement with you, Kevin.
Awesome. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk about when to buy used gear over new gear.
Hey, this is Doss Miller, and you're listening to the F11 Photography Podcast.
All right, we're back. So there are times when I think it makes sense for you to go out and purchase something new. And that time for me is usually when I buy a camera body. Camera bodies have a lot of components to them, a lot of moving parts, a lot of things that can go wrong with them. And yes, you do have things like shutter counts and all that. And, when people use electronic shutter count is starting to become less and less of a thing. But camera bodies just have a lot of things inside of them that I think can go wrong. And I found that especially since the pandemic, because of supply chain shortages and all that cameras have generally had good resale value despite that. And since the resale value is so close to the new price, I'm just very much, when it comes to camera bodies that are still being produced, I tend to lean buying new. And I know Brandon just bought the Z8, so I'm assuming in general he agrees with me, unless of course you're super broke. That's a different conversation, but go ahead.
I don't know, man. Like, I feel like buying used, like, I always think of that risk. I've bought used lenses before, and, it's funny, coming from us saying this, because we buy used film equipment all the time from people we've never met.
But that's because it's not being produced anymore, and it's just, I'll take the risk because I want to shoot film. But with digital, it's a little different game.
It is a different game because, okay, like the Z8, it's a $4,000 body. Let's say some guy's selling it for $3,200 and it's used. Like I'm still paying $3,200 for a camera that I don't know what it's been through. He could have got it out of the box and just, his toddler could have knocked it off the table the second day. Like, I just don't know. So I definitely, for more expensive things, I don't think it's worth the risk. Because frankly, I'd have to wait an amount of time to buy it again. If that was the case, I think I'd be stupid to buy it again. I'd probably get it repaired, but yeah, buying new always seems to be the way to go with high ticket items that are cutting edge technology and stuff like that, because it's inside of it. It's all connectors and stuff like that. So even though I did drop it in New York. Yeah,
and now if you sell it down the road, some person's gonna be like, "Have you ever dropped this?"
Absolutely no, me no.
Never. I outside for my digital cameras, the only camera that I bought used was my Fuji X-T20. It's funny, that camera, I've done so much shit to that camera, and I know it's gonna die one day. I bought that camera used for like $400 or $500. Then I sent it off to get it converted to full spectrum infrared. I mean, I've done a lot of work to that camera. And pretty much when that camera dies, it's going to be dead. Like, no one's going to want to buy a dead, full converted camera. Like, I've sunk some money into that camera. But that's the only camera I've purchased used in the last half decade. Everything else I purchased new because, like Brandon said, you don't know what's going on with these cameras. But when it comes to lenses, I'm much more likely to take the risk because, more often than not, I will buy a lens locally because I live in a major metropolitan area and people often put lenses for sale. And I will, meet them and I bring my camera with me and I test it out. As a matter of fact, I bought a Fuji GFX lens the other day from a guy on Facebook Marketplace. And we'll talk a little bit more about Facebook Marketplace a little later when we talk about strategies for acquiring new gear. But what are your thoughts on used lenses? Are you a little more risky in that sense? You're a little more, I don't want to say brave. I personally any lens that's come out in the last 10 years isn't going to have fungus. It is, if you see dust on the front element, it's all going to reveal itself pretty quickly. So really, I just put my camera in like single point autofocus and I just make sure that the motor has no issues, take a couple pictures with it, zoom in, make sure that there's no weird like shake going on, like maybe there's something wrong with the image stabilization if it's an image stabilized lens. I don't really see a lot of risk. Plus, just modern lenses are built pretty well these days.
I'm siding with you there for sure. Every lens I've got, even the Viltrox that's just come my way, like the lenses these days seem to be just tanks. They just seem to be metal, and if not metal, like really hard plastic tanks. They're all weather sealed up the wazoo because that's kind of the standard that we're at right now. Even for third-party lenses, everything has to be weather sealed. If you're going to sell a lens that's going to be going on much better equipment and decent equipment, like mirrorless lines coming out from Canon, Nikon, and Sony, obviously they're all weather sealed, so the lenses would have to be as well, or at least that's the line of thinking that I'm seeing on Amazon and B&H for all these third-party lenses that they're selling. So, yeah, when it comes to lenses in the last 10 years, I never even think about it. I really, on the image, I'm just looking for obvious misuse or obvious just, fungus or something like that. And then if I'm buying in person, just running it through a couple tests. I mean, I dropped my Z8, which isn't by any means a light camera, and it fell on my lens, and it was a 24-70 plastic body, and it just got up and worked fine. Haven't had lenses just work these days really well.
Yeah, I think I've told this story before on this pod, which is I had my R5 in my bag with my 85 1.2 attached to it, and I had a backpack that had an upper and a lower compartment, and somehow my lower compartment was open, and my camera slid into my lower compartment in my driveway and just hit the driveway with the 85 attached. My focal plane is 5 on the 85. I have a tiny little crack on it, and I have a tiny little scratch in the corner of my R5. But both the camera and the lens are perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with them. So, it's a testament to the durability of Canon L lenses. I'm sure Nikon and everyone else have very similar durability in their lenses. So, I don't really worry too much about buying lenses used. And now is a really good time to buy used, in my opinion, because during the pandemic, we had chip shortages. We had a lot of supply chain shortages. And so it got ridiculous. So for instance, a Canon RF 28-70 f2 new is $30.99. Well, nobody had them in stock. And so people were selling that lens, kind of like people are now doing with the Fuji X100V. They were selling it for more than you could get it for new. That has started to chill a little bit. I still see the X100V is selling for way too much, but I'm now starting to see RF 28-70s going for $2,500. Well, that's a $700 difference, $600 difference from what it was about a year and a half ago. So used prices are starting to fall. That's also true I found on film cameras. So Mamiya RB67.
I was looking at the RZ67 Pro 2 yesterday. I was looking at those prices on eBay and I was like, okay.
Yeah, we are finally starting. I think there's some reasons behind it. One, I think that it just there's a little less demand for it. But yeah, RB67s. So like the RB67 with like a 127 lens, you normally see it for around $500-$600 with the lens. I'm starting to see them for $400 now. That's a pretty big decrease in price. And, of course, that means I'm going to start looking at that Mamiya 7 because that's the one that is just a little out of my, it's a lot out of my range right now for what I want to spend, but it is that ultimate 6x7 smaller camera that I'm looking for. So I'm checking out those prices. They're starting to go down a little bit, and I'm a little excited about that. I'm not going to lie.
I'm so glad you brought that up. That put butterflies in my stomach because I was on eBay, and I think you and we kind of do the same thing. We kind of just like check the rounds. We see what film's doing every now and again. And so I was on eBay, and I was just browsing around for Mamiyas because I'm like, okay, I want a 6.7 system. I want to take studio portraiture that just has the quality of fidelity and the size, the resolution of a digital near enough with that, with that reproductive color quality of film. And so I'm looking at Mamiyas and kind of like if I'm going to buy something, I'm going to spend the money, I'm going to just take it all the way to the latest edition. So would I be happy with an RB67? Absolutely. I've got a Mamiya 645 1000S, not the Mamiya 645 Pro or Pro 2. However, I do want a lot more studio capability and compatibility with the RZ67 Pro 2, especially to be able to rotate and put the digital back on there. I think they all rotate. That's why it's called an RB. Yep.
That is literally why it's called an RB, yes. Rotating back.
Yeah. Can you tell I'm sick? And so, I was looking there, and the prices for an RZ67 Pro 2, which is like, I think that's the best you can get, like the latest iteration into the 90s, they're usually $2,500 to $3,200, one or two lenses, whether it's a 110, I think it's a 110 that comes on the 6.7, right?
The 110 f2, yes. That's the one. I think maybe it's a 2.8. I can't remember.
Okay. So
either way, it's super shallow for medium format.
Yeah, and those packages with the electronic viewfinder and everything, they're at like $1,500 right now, which is nothing.
Yeah, it's a 2.8. I looked it up.
That's a 50 millimeter equivalent, right?
110. So I believe you would take that and roughly divide it by 2. So 110 divided by 2 is, it's about 55, 60 millimeters, somewhere in there is the field of view at, f2.8. So, Of course, it's medium format. F2.8 is really like f2, f2.2, somewhere in there. It's pretty shallow.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I don't think contacts prices are going down whatsoever. They still have that celebrity inflation, and it's just not stopping.
They're like X100Vs. People overpay for that shit.
Yeah.
Well, coming up, we are going to talk about the best strategies for acquiring new gear. Cheetah Stand has started their Black Friday sale early, so if you don't want to go out shopping and scouring the internet for deals on Black Friday, you can just eat leftovers, get into your food coma, and chill with the family. Right now, they're doing 20% off all stands and modifiers with the code BF20. You also have tiered discounts if you spend $500, $1,000, $2,500, or $5,000. Check out the link in the description of this podcast for all available Black Friday discounts.
Hey, this is Vanessa Joy, and you're listening to the F11 Photography Podcast.
All right, we're going to talk about best strategies for acquiring new gear. And number one on my list is buy with your head, not with your heart. That goes back to the very first thing we talked about, where it's like, hey, overcome the temptation of getting the latest and the greatest. Really sit back and be analytical about it, because if you're not, you're probably going to make foolish financial decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. Take a look at your work. Take a look at what you're wanting to accomplish. And there's so many factors that go into this, like, is most of your work professional? Is most of it hobbyist? Is most of it personal work? And, that will change season to season. So you really have to look at, like, what are you trying to get out of photography? Is this like a stress relieving thing where you really think that, adding a new 1.2 lens is just going to get you out of the house and get you clear-minded. It's a great way to pass the time. It's a great way to spend your time as a hobbyist, or is it like, okay, your clients are booking you because they want a specific profile. They like the bokeh, they like the subject separation, and they love that sort of compressed look. And that's a statement in your photography. Okay. Maybe an 85 1.2 is up your alley. Maybe that's something you want to do. But I think a really good strategy is discipline. And I know how abstract that is, because at the end of the day, you can justify just about anything if you really want to.
Well, over time, I love where you're going with that, with the discipline, because over time I've kind of developed a strategy for acquiring new gear using my head rather than my heart, which is I play the long game. And I've been doing, film taught me this during the pandemic and the film price increases and all that. I played a long game. I would monitor prices daily. Every morning I'd get up, I'd do my morning routine, and I'd spend 5 minutes just looking at film prices to see what they were doing. But I've done something recently. So we talked about business and photography. When you get money, you're supposed to take money and pay all your bills and put money aside for retirement and this and that. And then when you have money left over, then you can decide what you want to do with that money that's left over. Well, I now, because I use QuickBooks and I can create envelopes for my money, I have a basically called a down on your luck Facebook marketplace fund that I just drop extra money into, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then daily I go on Facebook Marketplace, and I know what things are worth because I'm like, hey, what do I want right now? Not need, but want. And, there's a threshold in which something that I want now becomes so desirable because the deal is so good that I'm an idiot to say no, because even if I don't like it, I can sell it for a profit, And so one of the things that I did is I created the Down on Your Luck Facebook Marketplace Fund, or you have it's a funny story. So in the pro audio world, the Telefunken U47 is what Frank Sinatra recorded on. You see Frank Sinatra with a cigarette, and then they have that pop filter that says Capitol Records on it. That's a Telefunken U47. The Beatles recorded through it. It's a very well-known microphone for really good reasons. And, that microphone's 10 G's, right? And there's this story of this woman, her husband was cheating on her, and this was back in the Craigslist days before Facebook Marketplace. She just said, my husband won't shut the fuck up about this microphone. He cheated on me, blah, blah, blah. The first person to come to my door can just fucking have it. So things like that happened. And there were 5 dudes who showed up at the door to get the mic, and she just gave it away. I'm sure that had some ramifications in court. But nonetheless, you can find crazy shit like that happens in Facebook Marketplace. Some examples, what got me into pro photo. I got a light for $400. I told you that I just got a Fuji GF 50 3.5 lens. That lens goes new for $1,000. When it's on rebate, it's usually $600 or $700. There was a guy on Facebook Marketplace who was letting it go for $400, and it was fucking flawless. And I didn't. It's one of those lenses. I don't know if I really want it because I have a 45 and I have a 63. So 50 is just it's pretty damn close. But for $400, if I don't like the lens, I could probably resell it for $5 or maybe even $6. So I'm like, fuck it, I'm gonna get it. And so I have that fund for that, and I don't have any guilt because that's what that fund is for. It's my great deal pops up, I'm going to go get it. I had a guy, the reason why I have 2 Mamiya C330s is because there's a guy who was unloading a C330F, which is, by itself a $400, about a $300 body. He had 3 lenses, which are all $100 a piece, if you bought them on eBay. So that's $700, right? He also had a prism finder, which is $200. So now we're up to $900. And then he had a Pelican case and a handle, so everything would be about $1,000 if you were to buy it all individually on eBay. He was unloading the whole thing for $500. I was like, okay, I'm going to have another C330, because I can unload that thing down the road, or I can unload my older one because I like the newer one, the F, better. And so that is a strategy that you can use, is the Down on Your Luck Facebook Marketplace Fund. Play the long game, be patient, and sometimes some beautiful things will fall into your lap. But if you don't have the money available to do it, then that's now you're thinking with your heart, and you're gonna do something stupid like put it on a credit card or something. No,
don't do that.
Don't do that.
Yeah, because what people don't calculate when they're thinking with their heart is they're like, okay, how much money do I have left over? And then suddenly there's like 3 automatic payments at the end of the month that put them into negative withdrawal territory, and it just like that's not a fun way to live. I used credit cards to buy gear when I first started. I was still in college, making like $25 a year as a valet, and it like my D750, or my D5600, that wasn't working as well as I wanted it to, and I was just like, okay, we're gonna put the D750 on credit.
Yeah, and I do think that there are times when you can put things on credit, and I'll get into those here in a little bit. But I actually own an Adorama and a B&H credit card, and the reason I own them is because I save up cash for something. And then when they have financing, it's like you can finance something for 12, 18, or 24 months. I also have a Best Buy card, by the way. I have all 3 of those credit cards. And the reason I do that is because what I'll do is I'll be like, oh, there's this new $2,000 lens that I want. I will save up $2,000, and then I will put that lens on that respective store's card because they'll give you 5 or 10% back in like reward points, in cash. And if you pay everything in that month, then you get the 5 to 10% back, or if you finance it, you can finance it for 12 to 24 months, but you don't get the cash back. And so since my vice is buying photography gear, I just get like free money back. That's the way I look at it. And so I will save up for something. I will charge it to my card and not elect to take the long-term financing. And then I will immediately pay it off. And then, if it's a $2,000 thing and I get 5% back, I'll end up getting whatever, $100 of credit or something. And it's like, oh, that way, like, oh, I need a sock for a beauty dish or some small accessory. It's like, oh, yeah, I need a corrective gel for CTB or CTO. Okay, cool. I have $100 credit. Boom. I didn't pay out of pocket for it. I just have credit on an account with Adorama or B&H or whatever. So I think that's a responsible way you could pay with credit. We'll get into some other credit-related stuff later in the episode, but it looks like you wanted to say something, so I'm going to go ahead and let you talk.
I will never let this topic die. I love churning credit cards. That's one of my favorite things to do. I'll give you an example. My Chase Sapphire reward, like sign-on bonus, is what paid for my flight and my stay in New York for a week. That card is paid off and done. I'm not putting anything on it. I just recently got a Capital One Venture card. Same deal. If you spend $4,000 within the first 3 months, you get about $1,000 back, and that's very easy to do. You just put your rent on the card for 3 months plus groceries. Just pay it off the day it comes out of the card, and then I'm freewheeling. I think it's $1,000 travel points, $800 cash, and just do whatever the hell I want with it.
Yeah, but be smart because interest rates are fucking insane right now.
Dude, interest rates on cards are literally like fucking criminal. My Discover card is 30% interest rate. Do not fuck around with interest.
Yeah, do not fuck around with interest. Have the fucking money. Now, another thing you can do to save money when you purchase things, new things, I should say, is look for the rebates. Fuji is notorious for this. Fuji will take like a battery grip and take 50% off. They'll take a $400 battery grip and they'll do it for $200. Fuji makes a GF 35 to 70, which is a kit lens. They call it a kit lens for the GFX. Brand new, it's $999. 2 or 3 times a year, they put that lens on sale for $499. Do not be fucking stupid and pay $1,000 for that. So remember when I said play the long game? Spend a little bit of time watching what happens to the prices. Like, wow, Fuji constantly puts this lens at 50% off. So and you got to learn them. So like the one that I bought for $400, the GF 50 millimeter 3.5, that one has a map of 1,000. The 35 to 70 has a map of 1,000, but the 35 to 70 is usually 50% off. And then the GF 50 3.5, they only usually take $200 to $300 off. So you got to look at what they normally take off these things and wait for those rebates to happen because they happen 2 to 3 times per year. Another thing to keep in mind is like, if you're buying lights, I've talked about this in the past. Adorama, they absolutely like drop their pants on Black Friday. Like if you're going to buy anything Flashpoint, which is the same thing as Godox, like I've gotten 600 watt strobe lights that normally sell for $600 for $350. 600 watt second strobe for $350, as long as you don't need TTL, which I don't need TTL. That's a lot of power, and that light, you can beat the hell out of it. So be smart. Check out the Black Friday savings that Adorama has. They don't sponsor this. every year I'll end up buying one of those just to have another one.
It's actually, that's a really good point. Someone made this point on Threads, actually, which Threads for me is basically a photography forum at this point. Basically on Amazon's Christmas in July sales event and Black Friday, those are 2 key days when you should be stocking up on SD cards, extra batteries, and just any extra gear, like and accessories that are going to help your life out, camera straps, all that stuff. That's when you should be re-upping because the prices are pretty much cut in half on those days.
Yeah, think about things that cross over into the consumer world because everybody needs hard drives. A lot of people need SD cards beyond just photographers. They're not niche. A camera, a Nikon Z8 is a niche thing. That's for a photographer, but everybody needs hard drive space. And so because more people are buying hard drives on Black Friday, they're a more appealing thing to put on sale because they'll move more units. And so be smart about when you shop for things, and that will help you, with your strategy, or as George W. Bush says, strategery. But let's shift gears to when is a good time to acquire gear.
Hey, this is Malika Graddick, and you're listening to the F11 Photography Podcast.
All right, so when is a good time to acquire new gear? Because you may be looking at a lens and go, wow, that lens is $3,000. I don't have $3,000. And this is that conversation I had of when is it a good time to put something on a credit card? Okay, so I have a theory on that, which is, let's say you are a headshot photographer and your goal is that you want to be a headshot photographer. And I'm going to use Canon as the example because that's my primary system. And you see the RF 85 millimeter 1.2 and it's going for $2,800, which by the way, I think it's actually on rebate for $2,400, which once again, going back to what we were just talking about, look at when things go on rebate because I've actually never seen the RF 85 1.2 on rebate until now. I think also a lot of Canon lenses are finally going on rebate, which goes back to it's a good time to buy. But to my point, you're sitting there and you're like, I want to start a photography business and I want it to be headshots. Maybe you have some lights that you can use and the lights are good to go, but you're lacking a really badass headshot lens. And so you're thinking like, man, this thing's like $2,700. Should I put it on credit? And when I would say yes, go ahead and put it on credit. First and foremost, if you have some money put aside for it, put that money toward it. Like, when your first payments due or whatever, you're going to finance it, pay it down so you pay it off quicker. But if you can objectively justify that I am going to book, 4 headshot sessions this month, in addition to my normal income, right? So it's like plus business. I think I can get 4 new headshot sessions. And let's say your rate is $500. Okay. That's $2,000 you'll make off of those 4 headshot sessions for a $3,000 lens. Sounds like after 2 or 3 months, that thing could pay for itself pretty quickly. And if it's an investment that will make you money, and when you look at the crowded field of headshot photographers in your area and you want to try to separate yourself from them and maybe you just pull that extra 1 to 2% of quality out of it, that I think is a time in which you could finance something for 12, 18, 24 months. Because right around the holidays, the cards, they'll give you insane long-term financing. And of course, if you have a shitty month and you don't book those headshot sessions, you have that safety net of 12 to 18 to 24 months. You don't have to pay $500 that month. You could pay, $50 that month or something like that.
Yeah, small technicality. If you're already running like a business, you're already running an LLC, put it through a business card.
100%.
Make it very easy to organize your taxes and write-offs. Don't buy it personally and don't finance it personally. Get a business credit card. Just go through it and make it easy on yourself.
Absolutely. But as people are transitioning from personal, when they're going from a sole proprietorship to an LLC or whatever, S corporation, all that, there's always that gray area time where you are putting things on personal and you're transitioning to corporate. I have a corporate card now. It says Kevin Deal Photography on it and, from QuickBooks and all that. But I could if you are making an investment like on a new camera body or something like that, and it's going to be a 5-year investment, and lenses, of course, can go 20 to 30 years. And so, you're financing something for a year or two, you're paying it off in 3 months. If you actually know that's going to happen that way, I say take that risk because I think the risk is low. But if you're just going off hope, you have no business lined up, you're just starting from square one, you don't know your head from your ass. You're working a 9-to-5 job, but you're living paycheck to paycheck. That's probably a poor time to make that investment. You may just want to get something on the more budget side and really rely on your talents as a photographer to power you through. And you're just going to have to grind it out a little harder. And, I've been there, Brandon's been there. But when you get to that point where it's like, okay, I'm ready to make that investment in that beautiful piece of gear, that's the one scenario in which I think I could justify doing financing.
Remember, you can squeeze a lot of business out of really inexpensive items. You don't that's the thing is, Kevin talked about when can you justify a $3,000 lens, and I was thinking to myself, I can't see a time when I can justify a $3,000 lens unless I was doing headshot sessions for $3,000 a pop. Unless I was a celebrity headshot person. Of course, I can't tell the future, but a $3,000 lens is, Kevin's absolutely right. It's going to give 1% to 2% quality increase. But if you're a headshot photographer, you're going to be compressing the hell out of your photo, and wherever it's going to be uploaded is going to be compressed a second time after being framed down to about 1080 pixels on the long end. And so what you're going to be squeezing out of that, you have to ask yourself, is it worth the squeeze? Is it worth the squeeze of the fruit? So you can get a really inexpensive setup. You could use a Canon Rebel T3i and a prime 85mm lens, and with the right lighting setup and enough light, you can take headshots and probably get away with charging $500 to $1,000 a setup or per session, depending on your business skills.
Yeah, another question you have to ask yourself is it preventing you from taking that next step in your career? So, and I'm talking about objectively, not lust. So I'll use an example of something that I keep avoiding purchasing. I want it, but I keep talking myself out of it. And that is a 70 to 200 f2.8. It's a very common lens for events. And I actually have a college that hires me to shoot 2 graduations per year. And they pay me pretty decently for it. And, I've already could have paid for a 70 to 200 a couple times over with the amount of times that they've hired me. But I keep avoiding purchasing it because it really is truly a want at this point. It's not a need. And at these college graduations, I use a 28 to 70 f2 on one camera body, and I use a 135 1.8 on another camera body. I could just put a 70 to 200 on there, but I don't have anything between 28 and 70 at that point. It's very much a telephoto, and I find that for telephoto at this particular college graduation, the 135 is perfect. It's the right length and all that. And so I have overcome this obstacle by just trying harder and being smarter. It's like, well, I have 2 camera bodies. I have 2 Canon camera bodies, so I'll just take them to the session, and I'm good. And so that has kept me from purchasing this lens that's like $2,800. I do want one eventually because, it could help with weddings. I have a lot of justification for it, but I also keep finding ways to overcome having to use it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I wanted to make another point. Basically, this is something that Kevin and I are pretty good at in our own way, and that is just making it work with what you have. It's very easy to get locked into the zone where you think that, you're not going to be able to do a certain thing until you get, until you shave 3 f-stops off of your lens. And it's like, the fact of the matter is, if you have studio lighting, you've got plenty of lighting, and, you've pretty much got what you need to make it. If you can't afford gels, go to Michael's and use construction paper and bounce off the red or something like that. What I'm saying is you can make it work. Whatever you're trying to do, you can definitely make it work. Unless, of course, getting really nice spherical bokeh is your entire destiny and your goal. You can pretty much make anything work with a little bit of thought, with a little bit of elbow grease, a little bit of goodwill, and a little bit of eBay, a lot of these problems are more about upgrading and optimizing as opposed to and making your life easier as opposed to actually making it possible. Everything should be possible at pretty much bottom of the barrel affordable range.
100%. Are there any last subjects you want to talk about with this, or do you want to put the subject to bed?
Yeah, and one last thing is, a lot of this comes down to, Kevin and I, like, our professional take on things. If you're a hobbyist and you can afford it, obviously it comes down to, like, your finances, like how much can you swing, and how much is justifiable in your own world. But, like, when it comes to taking a good picture, that's where Kevin and I are coming from. It's not about, like, don't spend money on stuff that you can afford and would truly, make you happier. It's really just, don't be an idiot with your money. If you have goals in photography and those goals are somewhat business related or art related, and you think a lens and a camera body is going to change your life, it's not. It's really not. It's going to just make your quality a little bit better, and that's kind of it.
As we talk about purchasing things wisely, I want to talk to you about something that is near and dear to my heart, and that is Black Friday. It's an American tradition. We call it Black Friday because it's the time of year when retailers take their profits from the red, meaning a loss, to black, which means a positive. It was traditionally a time when retailers could right their ship. And as someone who spent almost a decade working in retail, I have some thoughts. First, let's talk about the psychology of a sale. People will go out and impulse buy things based on how much they think they are saving on it. If I manufacture something and I need to sell it to you for $100, I simply try to sell it to you for $100. You may or may not think it's worth it. But if I show you that it used to sell for $150 and I put a slash through it and I make it $100, all of a sudden you go, oh, I'm going to buy it because it's $100 instead of $150. But I still ended up getting that $100 I set out to get. And that is like the psychology of that sale. So now you come home to your spouse, your significant other, and of course they give that deep, long sigh when you go, well, it was $150, but now it's $100. It's just a tactic that they use to make you buy things, okay? Was it truly on sale? Think about that. But what does it actually mean? How do you actually quantify that? Retailers on Black Friday are like casinos in Las Vegas. The house always wins. Just keep that in mind when you see that double-digit interest rate getting higher and higher on your credit card. I sincerely hope all of you who celebrate Thanksgiving, or as the rest of the world calls it, Thursday, have a wonderful holiday. And if there's one piece of advice I can give you when you meet up with your family who has polar opposite political views that you do, is that you don't always need to take a position on everything. It's okay to say, I don't have a position on that, and then go right back to your turkey coma while watching the Lions and the Cowboys on television. That does it for today's episode. We thank each and every one of you for listening. We hope each and every one of you learned something today. Hopefully you can take some of these lessons to heart. These, of course, are from our personal experience. We are not experts on the subject. We just buy a lot of fucking gear. So F11pod.com is where you can find us. You can use the handle F11pod on Instagram and Twitter and all those other social media places. But until next time, kids, chase light and not algorithms.
Thank you for listening to today's episode.
For more information about this podcast, go to www.f11pod.com.